Sony just registered 2 cameras overseas. Could one of them be the a6700, or perhaps the a7C Mark II, or even the high-end pro-level a9 Mark III? Stick around for all the details after this short break. But first, please do me a favor. Follow me on Twitter, but most importantly, please subscribe to this channel. It doesn't cost you anything and really does help this channel grow. And if you're already a subscriber, thanks so much for your support. Sony registered 2 cameras according to photo rumors, WW499972 and WW542541. As you can see from this registration chart, we know very little about what the camera is going to do. We know a little bit about Bluetooth and the date of registration, but that's it. But the one thing we know with certainty, is that whenever we have a camera that's being registered, we get an announcement within 3 months, and it's usually between 1 to 3 months. So an announcement of 2 Sony cameras is definitely imminent. It's going to be happening this summer. The only question is one of those cameras going to be the pro-level a9 III? Well, the a9 III is definitely due for an update, but I don't believe that any of these cameras being registered right now is the a9 III, because generally pro-level cameras, they're announced in the spring, starting from, well, the second week of January, leading up until the end of June, and then things take a break before they build up again in fall. From the second week of September, including October and all the way through to November, is where we get the next round of cameras, and October's a really big time. And if the a9 III is coming this year, I'd expect it to be sometime late October. And I really wish I could give you some leaked specifications on this camera, the a9 III, but, well, we've had, shall we say, rumors for the past 2 odd years, and I gotta tell you, they've been all over the place, and I really don't believe them. I don't think there's anything credible out there for the a9 III right now, other than it's looking like, well, a fall announcement, and Sony Alpha Rumors agrees with this. So that leaves us with 2 other cameras. Now, one camera that I do think is a foregone conclusion that we're going to get in July, and that's the a6700. Now, this camera has been talked about quite a bit. Sony Alpha Rumors, Andrea, has talked about this camera a lot. It's basically a stills hybrid version of the FX30. It's got the same sensor as the FX30, 26 megapixels. It's got 7 stops of IBIS. It's got that AI processor that debuted in the Sony a7R5 back in November of last year. And it can do 4K video, 24, 25, 30 frames per second, all the basic frame rates, as well as 50 and 60, I almost said 30 again, as well as 50 and 60 frames per second, but it can do 4K 100 and 120 with a small 1.19 times crop. Now, the design of this body looks very similar to what you see in front of you here. The a6700 isn't a cinematic camera. It's not based on their FX line. It is based on the stills hybrid line. It will still have an EVF on the left, but it will have a scroll wheel on the front under the shutter button. The grip is going to be a little bit more ergonomic and a little bit bigger, 3 millimeters deeper and 4 millimeters taller. And the announcement is scheduled for, well, July. We don't know if it's going to be early, middle, or late, but at this point, signs are pointing to it's going to be, well, towards the middle of July. Let's say July the 12th. We got to get past July the 1st and July the 4th, 2 big holidays where things kind of slow down. Now, the pricing on this one here, the first leaked price, well, supposed leaked price, Sony Alpha Rumors said it could be around $1,999, and I think that would be a big no-no. I mean, after all, the FX30, guess what? It's $1,798, $1,796, so why make it $200 more? Nah, to me, it would make a whole lot more sense if it was around $1,500. So the a6700, I think that's almost a guaranteed. I think we're going to see this in July, at least announced in July. And when will it start shipping? I think it's going to start shipping towards the end of July or maybe in early August. That's one of the 3 cameras we talked about here. What was the other one? Well, that's the a7C Mark II, or the a7C II. I know Sony generally doesn't use the Mark term, but I come from Canon, so I'm used to using that Mark. So the a7C II or Mark II, depending on how you look at it. And this camera, there's a lot of anticipation around it, but like the a9 III, we don't have any leaked specifications. We don't have anything credible. But if we're getting 2 registered cameras, and I think one of them is definitely going to be the a6700, and if the a7C is the other one, well, here we are in June, borderlining July, so we could get the announcement in July, August, or September. And I really get a sense, usually when we have these registrations, it's most of the times, I'd say 80% of the time, we get the announcement within 4 to 6 weeks. So that would mean sometime, well, if we get the a6700 in mid-July, I wouldn't be surprised if we get the announcement. Did I say the a6700? Let me back that up. If we get the a6700 announced in early mid-July, then I think it certainly makes sense that Sony's got time for another camera in August, and that would be the a7C II. Interesting. I do want to talk a little bit about the a9 III, the a9 Mark III. This camera used to excite me a whole lot until Sony came out with the Alpha 1. Previously, the a9, it was their top-end professional camera. It was the best of the best. And then they came out with the a1. They put a ceiling on how capable the a9 could be. So the a9 III, I don't think is going to be too much better than the a9 II, but it's certainly not going to get close to the Alpha 1. And let's take a look at the a9 II. This camera is quite capable. It does have a 24.2 megapixel sensor, full frame sensor, and in this day and age, a lot of people are finding that a little bit restrictive. We see the Canon EOS R5 to come out with 45 megapixels, the Z9 to come out with 45 megapixels, the Z7 to come out with 47 megapixels, the Z8 to recently come out with 45 megapixels, and of course the Alpha 1 has 50 megapixels, so it'd be really nice to get a boost here from 24 megapixels up to something like 33 or 32. And in terms of the image processor, it's going to have a new image processor most likely. And to be able to shoot up to 20 frames per second, I'd really like to see that stick. And not just JPEG, I'm talking lossless RAW. Well, it's only going to be a problem if they move up from 24.2 megapixels to 33 or even higher. If they stick to 24 megapixels, it is possible to deliver 20 frames per second lossless RAW using CF Express Type A. It can deliver a continuous sustained write speed of 650 megabytes per second. That's based on Angelbird's new 1 terabyte CF Express Type A card. Video, 4K up to 30 frames per second, but I really expect that to go up to 4K 60. At this price point, they have to, because if you look at the competition, they're only going to be selling to Sony customers if they keep this price point and they only deliver 4K 30. And again, if they don't deliver 20 frames per second lossless RAW, with at least an ISO range of between 100 and 204,800, I think we're going to have a problem. Now, this camera should also have the 4-axis LCD that we see in the Sony a7R5. But now taking a look at the Alpha 1 with 50 megapixels, 30 frames per second shooting, but that is JPEG, that is not lossless RAW. There's no way on earth with a CF Express Type A card you could possibly deliver 30 frames per second lossless RAW at 50 megapixels. Now, in terms of video, 8K, 30 frames per second, 4K, 120 frames per second, and of course it's got the EVF that's 9.44 million dots. I expect the a9 Mark III to also have that. So when you see these two cameras clearly laid out, it certainly makes sense that the a9 Mark III is going to fit between those two cameras. I don't see it having 8K video. Now, if they keep the same price point as the a9 Mark II, I think that would be a mistake, but I don't think they're going to do 8K video. Look at the a7R5. It only does 8K at 24 and 25 frames per second, and it has a 1.2 times crop. So if we're looking at the a7R5 and what Sony's done there, we see what they've done with the Alpha 1. I really think that the a9 Mark III is going to sit right in the middle there. But what do you think Sony's going to do with the capabilities of this camera? I know I'm having trouble speaking. I'm a little bit excited here because I'm trying to anticipate what Sony's going to do with the a9 Mark III when it's got the Alpha 1 as a ceiling. And that camera came out, what, about 2 years ago? So we don't even know when the Alpha 1 Mark II is going to come out. And that really makes it very hard to predict where we can see the a9 III go. But 24 megapixels would work. It could work. But again, this is a professional level camera. And I think this matters more than video. The stills capability of this camera to be able to do 20 frames per second lossless RAW is very important. And at 45 megapixels, that's 1.2 gigabytes per second, almost twice the capability of a Type A card. So if they don't put CF Express Type B in there, then I think they're going to keep it to around 24 megapixels, give it a new sensor, give it that AI processor, and be able to deliver 20 frames per second lossless RAW. They might say 30 frames per second, but I can guarantee you if they say that, you're talking JPEG. You just have to do the basic math here. And if you're looking at lossless RAW, and as a photographer, lossless RAW really, really matters because that's where you have the power to fix things later on, to edit things later on. You don't have the flexibility in JPEG, and seeing 30 frames per second for the Alpha 1 sounds great, but I mean, who really shoots that? I know people do shoot JPEG, but what I'm saying is for a lot of pros that make money off of this, it's all about shooting RAW, and it's about shooting lossless RAW. And that Type A card, this is where it gets in the way. So would Sony put in a Type B and allow us to really boost the capabilities of this camera in terms of RAW? Or are they really saving those top-end capabilities for the A1 II? Let me know what you think about in the comment section down below. And if you want to stay up to date on all the latest news and rumors, whether it's regarding the A9 III, the a7C II, or even the a6700, well then go ahead and subscribe and also choose all notifications. And for all those news stories that aren't quite big enough to have their own separate video, whether it's news and rumors or even pricing discounts, well then go ahead and follow me on Twitter. It's amazing how many news stories come out on a given day, but some of them, they're not quite big enough. I'll look at it and go like, you know, that Pentax, it's a nice story, but it's not quite big enough to have its own separate video, so I'll tweet it out. Or today there was $100 off. It's still on tomorrow at Adorama, a GoPro Hero 11 Black. It's off for $100, so I think it's $499 off from $599. So I tweeted that out earlier today. So lots of great deals, and these are my links, the affiliate links down to Adorama and B&H. There's a huge amount of deals on right now for Panasonic, Canon, Nikon, and there's a few for Sony. Sony doesn't have a lot of sales on right now, so that kind of leads me to believe that we're not getting a refresh of the A9, I was going to say the A1, or the A1, but the A9 II. We're not seeing really big sales on these, and we're seeing a lot of big sales from Canon and Panasonic, which leads me to believe that we're going to see some really big camera announcements from Canon this fall, but also from Panasonic, who's been rather quiet. We were supposed to get the S1H Mark II announced this spring, but that didn't happen. But that's it for now. Thank you so much for watching. Have yourself a great week, and we'll see you again soon.